With several recent battleground state polls showing Kamala Harris gaining on Donald Trump, one prominent election forecaster now has Vice President Harris as the slight favorite to win the White House in November. Nate Silver, formerly of the website 538, now has his own Substack called the Silver Bulletin. Nate has just released an updated forecast that has the vice president narrowly favored to sweep the three Midwestern blue wall states and to carry Nevada. A sharp turnaround, of course, from where Nate had the race just a month ago, where he had Trump as a more than 2-to-1 favorite to beat Joe Biden. And Nate Silver joins us now. He's the author of the new book titled On the Edge, The Art of Risking Everything. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Nate, it's so good to see you.
Absolutely.
Repping the Yamamori Giants this morning.
Yeah, try to have a little fun. Up bright and early.
Sadaharu Ho, Hideki Matsui also played for the Giants. Yeah, Jesse Barfield, Gabe Kapler.
Gabe Kapler, a favorite of mine. Also, Gabe Kapler spent 1 year in my fantasy baseball league as an owner. He didn't do very well.
Oh, he was in your league?
He was in the league.
Okay. Well, we love the hat. Let's talk about your forecast,
For sure.
First, so there's been a lot of talk about a vibe shift since Joe Biden got out of the race. You don't deal in vibes, you deal in data.
For sure.
So what are you seeing since then?
We've seen momentum for Harris with her rising consistently to about a 2.5-point lead in national polls. And more importantly, being a little bit ahead in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan.
And so what is, to what do you credit that? Is it women who are moving over toward Kamala Harris? Is it swing voters who say they've made up their minds? Or how have you changed your forecast?
I mean, Donald Trump is not a very popular candidate, right? He lost the popular vote twice, lost the Electoral College last time. She has, I think, overperformed, I think, most people's expectations. But Democrats are actually pretty good at winning elections, right? They won in 2020. They had a good 2022, a good 2018. So maybe just a league average or league average plus Democrat is good enough to beat Trump. Although remember, the Electoral College has twice in the past 6 elections gone against Democrats when they won the popular vote. And the polls have been in error a couple of times, right? We saw Trump overperform his polls by a pretty wide margin the last time around. So that's why it is. I mean, if you're a poker player, then 54-46, that's an edge that you take. But for all intents and purposes, 50-50 jump ball toss up.
So certainly, I mean, you're dealing with numbers, you're dealing with the data, but you must get frustrated at times where people are yelling at you because of, especially in a moment like this where it's so tumultuous. We were just reminiscing. I mean, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump was just 1 month ago. You know, President Biden bowed out of the race only just over like 3 weeks ago. Things change so fast. That's just got to make everything you do harder.
Yeah, you don't usually have this much news compressed into this cycle. And now, of course, you have the DNC and then a debate. I mean, in some ways, this week, we're removed from the RNC. It's no longer such a shock that Harris is a candidate. This week might be an interesting one for polls for a baseline before this next series of major hurdles in the race.
So you have Trump as a slight favorite in Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina.
Yeah.
What about Nevada? That had been a state Democrats were very worried was getting away from them. What's changed there?
That state is now very slightly lean Harris, and it's the most emblematic of where Biden was struggling, right? I go to Nevada a lot for gambling purposes. But you have it's very working class, and it's also very diverse, right? You have a lot of Asian American, Black American, Hispanic American working class people, and they are people who have moved away from Biden. And now I mean, you know, the polling change there is dramatic. It was like +6 Trump, and now it's like +1 or 2 Harris, maybe more than that in some polls. So that shows you where her comparative advantage is.
And so the policies aren't very different, obviously, from Kamala Harris to Joe Biden. So is it just enthusiasm? Is it putting to bed the age issue?
I think it's 80 or 90% the age issue. I mean, voters said consistently, this is the #1 problem. I mean, Biden's approval ratings have gone up a little bit since he dropped out because people just thought it was not responsible to run to president until he was 86. So, I mean, look, she has other issues. I mean, inflation and the border. But, you know, they've more than doubled their chance of winning the election overnight. And that's a pretty remarkable thing to do in the span of this crazy month that we've had.
And Claire, so just, again, this is just a moment in time. It's still August, 3 weeks now since Joe Biden dropped out and handed the baton effectively to Kamala Harris. But it has been extraordinary for all the, should we have an open convention? Should we let these governors get in? Who should it be? How quickly this party has not only rallied around, but been incredibly enthusiastic about Kamala Harris.
Yeah, it's been really fun, I think, for people who were very worried about Donald Trump getting in the Oval Office again. And you know what's really interesting about this, Willie, is that when Trump is marginalized and cornered, his instincts are not to track to the middle or to become more reasonable in what he says. He really gets more and more bizarre the more he feels pressure that he is losing. That's where the old "they're going to cheat" thing came from, when he started worrying in April of 2020 that he couldn't win. So really what would change this trajectory of these polls would be something changing in the candidates. Now, the debate is a moment that could upset this momentum, but I'm trying to figure out what would really disrupt this momentum going forward for Kamala Harris, because I believe Trump will get worse and not better when he is confronted with reality of these polls day after day, to say nothing of the size of the crowds, which we all know the Harris crowds are his kryptonite.
And let's remember in 2020, when polls started showing him losing it for a little while, somewhat significantly, to Joe Biden that spring. That's when he started talking about the mail-in ballots. That's when he started talking about this is going to be rigged, the system's unfair, they're changing the rules because of the pandemic. What we're seeing now, I just want to flag this, he's starting to say again that the Democrats' candidate switch, going from Biden to Harris, he's using phrases like unconstitutional, illegal, it's not right, seemingly like he's laying the groundwork for what comes next. The next time he's going to appeal or contest or refuse to accept the election results. We should note there's nothing in the Constitution about political parties. What they did is completely fine and accurate and legal. But I think people have already started flagging, like, let's watch that rhetoric here as he starts to look towards November.
Yeah, he's already softening the ground for a loss, and he can explain why it happened like he did last time through lies. So, Nate, what, in your view, could change over these next 3 months or so, the trajectory that you have it on, which is shifting toward Kamala Harris?
Look, I think she's run a very good campaign so far and has kind of proven that sometimes your second try is a lot better than your first. I think she may soon face the perception of being a front runner, which is a little bit of a different vibe, to use that term. Expectations are higher now. She may get more press scrutiny on the lack of press conferences, for example. You know, it takes a lot of energy to both be vice president and run the campaign. But yeah, look, we have so many known unknowns, but also unknown unknowns. I mean, we wouldn't have known about, you know, COVID a month until it happened in 2020. We wouldn't have known about the assassination attempt on Trump. And so it's more just saying we have a long way to go. History suggests that you have unpredictable news events, and the polling is pretty close, and the polling has been wrong before. So complacency could be one potential danger, not now, but in 3 weeks. If she has a good convention, is now up 5-6 points in these national polls, then complacency could be a little bit of a risk, I think.
And she does need to face questions that a lot of voters still have about her change of positions from when she ran last time until now. And she said she's abandoned some of those. Okay, let's turn to the book. It's called On the Edge, The Art of Risking Everything. So explain, if you would, Nate, for our viewers, the river and the village, and how that plays into the book.
So the village could be Morning Joe, for example. It's kind of the East Coast establishment in politics, media, academia, tends to be fairly progressive, tends to lean Democratic. It's a more familiar term. The river is the world of calculated risk takers, so it kind of starts out in the world of poker. By comparison, the poker players are innocent, but then you meet people in crypto, you meet people who work for hedge funds, people in AI, and especially people in Silicon Valley, which is kind of the tip of the spear for the river. I know these people. I am one of these people. I like these people in some ways, but they're competing with the village they're both groups of elites competing for influence and power. And it's getting pretty bloody sometimes, right? You see some parts of the river going more and more for Donald Trump. It's not everybody. I mean, California is still a blue state, but you see, Elon Musk would be a member of the river, a much admired member of the river, or Peter Thiel, for example. And so you've seen more confrontation.
So, Sam Bankman-Fried, Sam Altman, Bill Ackman, also a part of the river. So how do they view themselves, the river? How do they view their role and sort of poking at the village?
I think they see themselves as being a little bit contrarian, which is a tendency that I have myself, and I don't frown on inherently. But I think they thought that as kind of the village has become bluer and bluer and college-educated voters have become bluer and bluer, the contrarian instinct has gotten them, I think in some cases, a little bit red-pilled. When they pick presidential candidates or candidates for, J.D. Vance, for example, although in some ways is a member of the village, he's law school, best-selling book, or the Blake Masters candidates, I think they don't necessarily have a lot of crossover appeal to mainstream Americans.
So, Nate, when you set up this competition between the village and the river, you say the river is winning at the moment. Tell us why.
Yeah, look, if you look at tech and finance, it continues growing as a share of the economy. These top VC firms do very, very well as far as like a 20% annual return on investment. Maybe I can get 7 or 8% in index funds, so they do a lot better than that. And they're kind of winning the cultural war in certain ways, too. I mean, I don't think that Twitter has been a great financial investment for Elon Musk, but it has, I think, moved the discourse to the right in a lot of ways. And, and journalists like me are still on Twitter. I still enjoy some features of the platform, but he's shifted the conversation in a lot of ways.
It's interesting, too. We were discussing in the break how the River made a big bet, a lot of them, on Donald Trump when he was running against Joe Biden. We're talking about Bill Ackman and Elon Musk and all these people you write about. And since things have changed, have you picked up on any buyer's remorse now that he's running against Kamala Harris?
You get that sense, right? I mean, if they thought they had like a 75-25 bet, and back in the day when Peter Thiel endorsed Trump in 2016, he was also playing the odds. He thought that Trump was a little bit better than the models and the polls showed, so it's worth making a contrarian bet. But I think they overestimated how much of a personality cult Democrats had around Biden. It's not like Trump, right? Democrats, like I said, they're pretty good at winning elections, and it was so obvious that we could double our odds by replacing the candidate that they did the pragmatic thing, and the GOP was caught very flat-footed by that. As a result, J.D. Vance has been defined in a way that might be hard to undo. Tim Walz, there's a little bit more battle over, and even Harris has seen her favorables increase a lot, but they were really flat-footed, did not empathize with Democrats' predicament, and as a result, I think are in a tougher race now.
Yeah, as you're right. They take risks, and sometimes risks don't pan out. We'll see if this one does.
Absolutely.
The new book is titled On the Edge, The Art of Risking Everything, on sale now. New York Times bestselling author Nate Silver. Nate, always good to talk to you. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks, Nate.
Contrast again, a campaign firing on all cylinders, and I don't know what the most generous way. I mean, Trump it's hurricane season. He's a storm. He'll gather more steam at some point and blow back over us. But that moment is not today's news cycle.
Yeah, I mean, look, in 2016, whatever Trump did worked. But it only worked in 2016, and it worked incredibly well. And I think it was he got out voters who were these low propensity voters who tended not to vote, the hidden Trump voter, and he was able to connect with those people. Since then, he's struggled. And I think he truly believes that he can get those people out and that there are enough of them to put him over the top. And I think the lesson that that Harris has really learned from Hillary Clinton in 2016 is you can't take anything for granted, and you have to get out there, and that nothing is a fait accompli. So I do think, and we see her saying that during these speeches, that we just have to get out there. They just have to campaign.
And let's not ignore what's happening on the other side. Kurt Anderson, your tweet got all of my attention this morning. You wrote this: after one nominee dropped out for seeming too elderly, I don't understand how a reporter writes and editors publish a 900-word article about the other nominee's 2-hour talk and its technical problems without mentioning its salient stylistic feature, his, Donald Trump's, continuous slurring.
Yeah, I mean, it surprised me. I mean, it was, I managed to get through half of the, whatever it was last night.
Good on you.
I did my best. First, I couldn't get in, and that frustrated me as well as pleased me that they were having this tremendous glitch. But then I did, and I thought I'd listen, knowing you would call me and I would come on your show. So I woke up this morning, and as I do, read, the New York Times, and I was their straight main news story, almost 1,000 words, about this event, and they talk some about the things they talked about, but the writer clearly knew that wasn't very relevant, that he was saying the same things and rambling everything. But so it was stylistic. He rambled, he meandered. It was softball questions. There were technical glitches. Yet this main thing that everybody I know and thousands of people online and elsewhere were talking about is what's with his voice? Mm-hmm. They didn't mention. All they needed is one sentence saying this was a new fact about his seeming elderliness or whatever it was, and then maybe get a comment from the campaign. And they didn't do any of it. And I mean, people say, "Well, are you surprised? It's the Times. It's the Times." And I'm not among the reflexive Times haters in that sense, as so many of my friends are. But once again, I was surprised that they would do this, and I don't get it. But I did listen, and I heard things, for instance, like Trump say to Elon Musk, speaking to labor, as Governor Walz did today. He said, the thing I love that you did, you just walked right in there and said, "Oh, you're going to go on strike? Good, I'll fire you all." Yeah, that's how you, as a candidate, trying to lead this new workers' party in America. Really get the workers on your side by saying you're going to fire striking workers. It's amazing. So yeah, that was staying on message in a certain sense. That wasn't calling Kamala Harris a name, but it's a message that I don't think is going to play for.
Kurt, let me show you some of what he did say about Vice President Kamala Harris's Time magazine cover.
She is terrible. She's terrible. But she's getting a free ride. I saw a picture of her on Time magazine today. She looks like the most beautiful actress ever to live. It was a drawing. And actually, she looked very much like our great First Lady, Melania. She didn't look like Camilla. That's right. But of course, she's a beautiful woman. So we'll leave it at that.
I don't know what the question is to ask of you. So I guess I'll tell you what I thought about. In the Robbie Kaplan depot for E. Jean Carroll, they show him a picture of E. Jean Carroll, and he says, "That's Marla. That's Marla." And his lawyer, I don't know which Alina Habba it was. Maybe it was the Alina Habba. Says, no. I mean, he didn't know who he was looking at. He didn't know who his wife was. He didn't know who E. Jean Carroll was. He's talking about a cover of Kamala Harris, who he has all sorts of different names for. And again, because of the slurring, which you point out, it's not clear if he can't remember her name or is using derogatory nicknames. And anyone who thinks they know, I don't know how they know, because he's so scattered from reality. But this is calling Vice President Kamala Harris so beautiful and saying she looks like Melania. What is this?
Well, you know, his various flattering physical descriptions of his daughter, his comparisons of this person who is he's in litigation with later, E. Jean Carroll, looks like his wife. This person he's running against President Ford looks like his current wife. It's a new wrinkle in the pathology of Donald Trump that we can, you know, we'll fill textbooks one day. It's bizarre, and he you know, as you say though, it's hard to know, is this an impairment or is this just a different version of getting old? Whatever. Again, it's another reason why it seemed to me relevant to this story. Just after a guy left the race for appearing too old, as well as scatterbrain and everything else. Well, this is relevant. No, it was bizarre. So many things, because as Elon Musk promised, it was a real conversation, and it was that. I had a feeling that it was like a conversation he would have with some guy or person at Mar-a-Lago, right? Just going off the cuff, and I think this, and I think that. Look at that picture of Time, and just the stream of consciousness with which he probably does have conversations with his sycophants at his club. And he had a sycophant who was not a member of his club, but doing the same thing that I expect the people in Palm Beach do.
So what I think is amazing also, Tim Miller, is that Elon Musk makes things that are technical in nature, and the platform that was so glitchy that Kurt and many others couldn't get in is one of the things he owns. What of the incompetence of all this?
Yeah, well, he's working on that Neuralink, which is the chip that he's going to put in our brains, apparently. And I really hope that the team that's working on the brain chip is not related to the team that can't figure out how to do an audio live stream. Just because it doesn't. I'm not a technical person, but it doesn't seem that hard. We're having a conversation right now. There's not like 30 minutes of static before we come on. You know, you can do it on many different platforms and figured out how to do this. So it is a little bit concerning for the brain chip folks. And you know, and I think it's possible the technical difficulties also led to the slurring, as you said, when you were giving multiple possibilities over there. It might have been a compressed audio issue. Hard to know. But to me, like as a political matter, you know, just kind of listening to you all and like listening to Tim Walz and listening to the clips of Donald Trump grossly compliment Kamala Harris's looks for some and compare her to other first ladies for some reason. I've just come to like this guy. They're flailing. I mean, he has no message. He does not know what to do. And, you know, my colleague Mark Caputo at The Bulwark wrote about this. Remember that press conference last week where he like compared favorably his insurrection to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech?
Yes.
The strategist, yes. That was just like was that last week or was it 2 days ago? It's hard to
It feels like 11 years ago, but yes, it was last week. Yeah.
But that, according to Caputo's reporting, the advisors wanted that to be a small briefing where he talked about how extreme Kamala Harris's agenda is or whatever, just like a typical political thing that you do in a campaign. We're going to have a press call. Our message today is going to be the other candidate is extreme. Here's 3 bullet points. Take 1 or 2 questions and leave. Like, that's how a regular campaign works. That's how you do politics. Instead, he gives that rambling talk, and then he goes to Montana and he gives that speech. And during the Montana speech, he has an aside where he complains that Kamala Harris gives the same speech every time. And he's like, Kamala Harris is just on message all the time and it's boring. And it's like, no, that's how politics works. And so, he's really self-sabotaging in a lot of ways with all of this. And I think that it is working out to the Harris-Walz team's favor. And you look at that Walz speech, and it's just classic politics. He's playing to the base, the union workers. He's explaining which issues they're aligned on. He's rebutting a criticism that J.D. Vance, a false BS criticism that J.D. Vance has issued on him. He's pushing back on that. Wham, bam, that's it. That's a press event. Here we are. And Trump's just not capable of that, at age 78.
It's so interesting that you make the point about the attack on the Harris stump speech. I had the job in 2004 of updating the George W. Bush Trump speech, and we changed 2 things: the greetings at the top and the thank yous at the bottom. And then I gave them, it was lower tech than today, and I'm lower tech at that. And so when Fox News thought they finally had the gotcha, they got their tape editor in on a weekend and they cut the stump speeches, and oh my God, there were whole paragraphs that were the same. Everybody until Trump did that for every event, Tim Miller.
Yeah, it's called message discipline. It's funny you say that, remembering 2004. I had a friend text me about this about 2012, and they said their job was to write 2 new sentences on top of Mitt Romney's stump speech. It was like, we want to give somebody a little bit of news, so we'll have 1 piece of rhetoric about whatever the latest news is, and then all of the same stuff. Like, that's just how
8 years later, things
works.
change. I'm open to that.
Yeah, that's just like how politics works, and it's how you drive a message. It's how people know, what your campaign message is, what your agenda is going to be. And like, Trump just isn't, he's too narcissistic. He's a megalomaniac. He couldn't bring himself to do that. He wants to, vamp and, do these personal attacks and go do on these strange asides. And as Kurt pointed out, he wants to brag about things. So it's like his sycophants can cheer for him, like they're kind of outside at the Mar-a-Lago club on the Lanai, having an Arnold Palmer or whatever. And like, that's just bad politics.
Joining us now, Susan Rice, former director of the Domestic Policy Council in the Biden administration, obviously also former national security advisor and UN ambassador. Ambassador Rice, as we just heard, Donald Trump referring to Harris as Camilla, which doesn't seem to be an accident because he deliberately mispronounces her name. What do you think he's trying to achieve?
I think it's all part of his strategy to denigrate and objectify the vice president, as he does women of all sorts all the time. Donald Trump is incapable of respecting women. And it is not only in his DNA and how he has treated women at every stage of his life, personally and professionally, but it is at the root of his policy approach. Project 2025 and the Trump-Vance agenda is to take American society and American women back decades and generations to a time when we didn't control our bodies, we didn't have rights. And this is really the thrust of what his agenda is about. Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are very clear. This is an election about the future. Are we going to have a country where everybody counts, whatever their background, whatever their gender, whatever their age or where they came from? If they're an American citizen, they deserve a stake in this country and the ability not just to get by, but to get ahead, where our freedoms are protected and respected. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance really want to take us back to a time when those rights and freedoms were denied, not just to women, but to the vast majority of Americans in this country. And so he approaches this by belittling and denigrating and objectifying his opponents, and in this case, using gender and sexualized terminology. Sometimes he uses racialized terminology, but it's all to distract from the reality that he is running a campaign that is really retro, dangerous, and self-serving.
Let me pick up on the racial component of this, because some Republican leaders, the former speaker and others, have criticized the racial attacks, the thread of racial attacks, and said that that's not what he should be doing, in particular after his attacks at the NABJ convention in Chicago. I wanted to play some of that for you.
So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear.
So I wanted to ask you, as someone who has dealt with this all your professional life, all your life, just how do you react to that? Someone who became a black person.
I mean, in so many ways, it's not worth dignifying that kind of base and ignorant attack.
But as a tactic, as a campaign tactic, we've seen it in previous campaigns.
It's a tactic that's meant to divide and to denigrate the fact that 10% of the American population, 33 million Americans, Andrea, are mixed race, have more than one racial background. And the fact that somebody who has been president and is running for president can't understand and respect that it is possible to be a mixed race person and as valued and intelligent and capable and worthy as anybody else. And that as an American and an American of African descent in this country, given our history, given how this country has handled matters of race, that people who are mixed race and are and one of those races is black are viewed as and typically identify as black. And that is what Vice President Harris has done all her life. And frankly, it's not just because she went to Howard University and was in a black sorority. She is a black person because that is her background, her experience, and that is how she chooses to identify. And she doesn't have to do that at the expense of her Indian identity. It is possible, Andrea, to be both.
Let me also ask you about NBC reporting that Harris is going to begin to highlight, quote, unfinished pieces of Biden's agenda that she would champion as president. She has been criticized so far for not laying out policies in these couple of weeks where she's, frankly had to organize a campaign and choose a running mate. But universal child care, paid family leave, affordable housing, minimum wage increase, a lot of the things you worked on in the White House. How important is it for her to find a way to differentiate herself from aspects of the Biden agenda? Maybe, move the ball, put an emphasis on other things. How does she do that and still be loyal to the fact that she worked with Joe Biden?
Well, Andrea, first of all, it's been barely over 3 weeks since she has been the presumptive Democratic nominee. She's done an extraordinary job picking up first-class running mate, barnstorming the country, generating enthusiasm, making people understand that this is an exciting election about the future and that one that can be waged on the basis of optimism and joy rather than fear, hatred, and division. She will, as she has said, outline aspects of her economic policy later this week. But I think it's very important to remember that this has been the Biden-Harris agenda. Kamala Harris has been an integral architect and executor of the policies of the Biden-Harris administration. And when you talk about the important business that she is committed to continuing and finishing, things like paid family leave, making permanent the child tax credit, making child care more affordable, raising the minimum wage, respecting workers, and helping to strengthen unions. These are elements of a policy framework that she devised as part of a key part of the Biden administration and is keen to see through to the finish line. So there will be important, as there should be, aspects of continuity in many policy areas. But of course, the vice president will outline her vision and where she sees opportunities to to advance their collective agenda, the Biden-Harris collective agenda, and take it further forward. I think we all look forward to hearing that. But this notion that she somehow doesn't deserve credit for and isn't part of and wasn't an integral architect of the Biden-Harris administration agenda is not only false, it's frankly somewhat bizarre and offensive.
Trump insiders now describing what we can only see as the Harris effect, an angry, confused, and rattled candidate who is unsettled by his new foe. Trump has been watching Harris get the kind of coverage and attention that he craves, including upending the whole political media television cycle. And yes, we are a part of it, but if you measure it even outside of this channel, you would find a lot more news about Harris and her running mate and her momentum and her ideas, and less about the other guy. You can see the big crowds in Nevada. Her crowds and enthusiasm alone has become a story unto itself. Or take Time magazine, which everyone knows for many decades to set a kind of tone in America. Magazines may not matter quite as much as they did decades back, but this cover is the kind of thing that people still see in supermarkets or these days online as it whizzes around, and they are calling it at Time her moment. Harris hammering Trump as a creature of the past.
This campaign is not just about us versus Donald Trump. It is about two different visions for our nation. One, ours, focused on the future. The other, focused on the past.
Past versus future is a lens that Democrats say is working and is true. Now, Donald Trump is not known for his fidelity to the truth. He has been documented as the most lying public official alive, according to independent accounts like the Washington Post. So whether or not he knows it's true, he knows it is apparently working because this has been, quote, the worst 3 weeks of Donald Trump's campaign yet. That's how the New York Times puts it here, reporting how people around Trump say he's knocked off his bearings, he's disoriented by the contest with Harris, that he has been in a, quote, foul mood, and, quote, ranting about Kamala Harris. All of this reflecting his view that things aren't going well. Remember what I said. He may not be known for truth, but this appears to be a part of political reality that he does understand and that he has also been making, the Times reports, quote, one forced error after another. Harris clearly has momentum right now. Now, there are many ways to measure this in politics. And if you follow this show, you may know that I've told you for years now that we don't cover national polls much in covering the Electoral College because the national polls don't correspond to how the vote is ultimately counted. And we also try to be very serious and careful when we do present you with data because, as you might remember from 2016 or any number of years, the narratives can take on a life of their own. So what I'm about to show you is basically a statistical tie in these key states, which is an improvement over what Biden was doing. The Harris campaign sees this as great news. Some have even referred to it as a lead, although as you'll see, it's more like a tie. In Michigan, Harris has improved to 50% over Trump's 46%. A 4-point difference, but as I'm clearly showing you, the margin of error is larger than that. The Times has polling snapshot coming out of the other key so-called blue wall states. These are the ones that if Harris won all of these, she would win the election based on the coalition they've had in the past. Wisconsin, very similar. 50, 46, margin of error. And then Pennsylvania, where Harris was with her new running mate last week. Everyone knows it's a crucial swing state. You see again, it's almost like we didn't change the polls, but we did. You see the line of Pennsylvania at the top, 50, 46, and also margin of error. So basically, she's improved, but it is a statistical tie. Advisors are telling Trump Harris will grow those kind of leads further, quote, coming out of the Democratic convention. That's what his own people are warning him, according to a brand new Axios report starting the week. That convention is now just a week away. And Kamala Harris is no stranger to the event. What it takes up on the main stage, those speeches are harder than they might look. I've covered those conventions inside the hall and out, and it's a big room. It's a stadium speech, even big candidates. If you're a statewide candidate, that might be the biggest stadium speech you've ever given, to say nothing of the national, international audience. But she's actually been doing this for a couple cycles. We want to show you all the way back to grassroots events around the conventions in 2008 to then taking that main stage in Obama's reelection.
democracy, I believe, is defined and symbolized by many things, including a process that is fair and allows everyone to be heard.
The American dream belongs to all of us.
It is also defined by the existence of a Constitution and a love of that Constitution.
That's a dream we will put within reach of all our people. Thank you.
Harris going from the hallways to the main stage, just as Tim Walz went from the windows to the walls, if you know that one. This has been a pretty fast, consistent rise. And of course, the twist this year was her becoming the nominee. And that is confounding Trump. Democrats have long argued that Donald Trump's policies pull America into the past. Harris, though, now embodies that contrast in a whole new way, rising with this energy and this enthusiasm against an opponent 20 years her senior. I told you we have that Trailblazer special coming up in just moments, but on this breaking news with all of the Trump issues, I want to bring in our political science professor from Fordham University, Christina Greer, the author of Black Ethnics. Welcome. This is how Trump is starting the week. A lot of those quotes were from people around him. What do you see in the campaign as we start the week?
Well, as you reminded your audience, Ari, it's only been 3 weeks since Kamala Harris was elevated to the top of the ticket, and it's only been 6 days since Governor Walz was added to the ticket. And so the momentum is real. The money that's been pouring in is real, and not just big donations, but small donations, which actually can translate into votes because people are feeling invested and excited about this new race. It's a new race in many ways. Donald Trump's strategy was, don't vote for the old guy because the Black woman might become the president if something happens to him. Well, Joe Biden has stepped aside, and now Donald Trump is scrambling for a message, which is she's not that smart. That's not really resonating with a lot of voters who have seen her not just as the vice president for the past 3+ years. She was a senator for several years. She was the attorney general of the largest state in the nation. She has a very impressive resume, more impressive than a lot of people who run for the presidency. So his tactics aren't landing. He's scrambling. And we also know, and you all have talked about this, his choice of vice president is feeling very Sarah Palin-esque, is an impulse buy in many ways. And so J.D. Vance isn't adding to the ticket or the base. And so it's one unforced error after another. And we know Donald Trump spirals when things don't go his way.
As Donald Trump and Republicans departed their convention in Milwaukee last month, they were confident that they had the election in the bag. And they were right that the polling really did show them ahead. The electoral math was moving in their favor, with Trump leading President Joe Biden in many of the key battleground states and having a variety of ways to get to that 270 to win. Well, now we're in a different world. New polling of likely voters in 3 crucial blue wall states, so-called, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Of course, Donald Trump won those in 2016. They show Harris leading by 4 points. That is within the margin of error, but also a significant swing from last month, when President Biden was virtually tied or slightly behind in all 3 states in the same New York Times Siena College poll. Vice President Harris is also wiping out Donald Trump's lead across the Sun Belt. That's in the Morning Consult Bloomberg polling. Registered voters in Arizona back her over Trump 49-47, 47-45% in Nevada. In Georgia, Harris and Trump are neck and neck. And the race is also within the margin of error in North Carolina, which Joe Biden didn't carry in 2020, though he did carry Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. All of which provides a whole bunch of different routes for the Harris campaign to get to the 270 electoral votes needed for victory. Dan Cannonen is the battleground director for the Harris-Walz campaign, and he joins me now. Dan, it's great to have you on. First of all, just how does the campaign see what the set of battleground states are?
Well, you named a bunch of them, Chris, and I want to point out that we feel great about the momentum. We've had tons of volunteer activity. We've had hundreds of thousands of folks sign up for this campaign, and thousands of them shifted into activity and activation for voters. But all those polls you mentioned, it's great movement in some respects, but it's still a very close race. And something our campaign has emphasized from the beginning is that those 7 states, the blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, they've just been really, really close states every single cycle. They were close in 2018. They were close in 2020. They're close in 2022, whether it's a governor's race, a Senate race, or for president. They're just very, very tight places. And we have believed this entire time that having an operation that could be at scale and engage people on the ground and have a presence and voter activation was necessary to win a close election. This campaign has been designed to win a close election. And now with that volunteer enthusiasm we're seeing in those crowds, we're turning that into action in all those places where we expect close races. But as you said, many pathways within those 7 states.
Yeah, let me stay on that for a second. What do you mean by that? And so, you have a rally in Arizona, 20,000 people show up, or in Wayne County, right outside Detroit, in the airport, 15,000 people.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a bunch of reasons you do that, right? You get supporters fired up, you get a lot of local media, and usually it's pretty positive when the story is 15,000 people came out for a candidate, right? Are there other ways in which people that are going to rallies like that are getting plugged into the campaign that give you a more durable organizational advantage over this last 3 months here?
Yeah, 100%. Everyone that goes to that rally, the staff is there. And again, 1,500 staff across Battlegrounds, 260 offices. So when that crowd comes to a state, there's a team there, both staff and volunteers, that's meeting those folks as they're in line, waiting to get in the venue. They're being clipboarded. They're being asked to join a volunteer shift. We're then getting them into volunteer and then reshifting them for more volunteer shifts to make them recurring volunteers and to bring their friends and to grow that organization. In Nevada alone, Chris, 5,000 volunteer shifts came out of that rally in Las Vegas. More than 4,000 were from native Nevadans, right? And then those folks will, again, grow the organization from there. More than 30,000 folks have signed up the Arizona campaign since the president endorsed the vice president. There's hundreds of thousands of folks getting involved and tens of thousands at these rallies. But the key is, if it's an organization that's there built to engage those folks, that it doesn't just evaporate into thin air. It gets put into action. It gets channeled into talking to voters, into registering them, into curing ballots, into having a presence in communities, doing door knocking and phone calling, being a permission structure and a persuasive presence, and then ultimately mobilizing people at the end of the campaign. That takes work and an organization that we have built to capitalize on this incredible, organic, and palpable enthusiasm for Kamala Harris.
So when we go back to that map, we talk about those states. And again, I think they're familiar to people because these so-called blue wall states, which are the states that Donald Trump had flipped in 2016 that gave him the path. And then, of course, those 3 Sun Belt states, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, right? North Carolina's in there, and it's very interesting because North Carolina's a really interesting state. It's almost, it's very closely divided. It has a very gerrymandered legislature, but it has a popular two-term Democratic governor. Barack Obama carried it, I believe, in 8 and 12. It always seems really close. This year, I've heard from formerly the Biden campaign, before the switch of nominees to now, that there was a genuine feeling North Carolina was as much a possibility as any state. Why?
Well, a couple reasons, Chris. And I ran that state in 2016 for Hillary Clinton at the end of that campaign, so I know precisely how tough it is to win. It's been close, razor close in many elections, but we haven't quite gotten over the hump since that 2008 Barack Obama win where he won a bunch of states, right? But in 2016, it was about a 3.5-point margin for Trump and Clinton. We cut that by more than half in 2020. The president lost that by about 1.3 points in 2020. And now with demographic shifts, the state's a little better for us. But I think really importantly, there are just such an element of extreme MAGA politics in North Carolina. You've got Mark Robinson, who says things all the time that I don't want to say on the air and really repels voters. He is a direct line from Donald Trump. Those politics are of Trump. They are the same thing. It's a MAGA ticket there. I think voters have rejected that kind of politics in North Carolina. Josh Stein's doing really well. He's a fantastic candidate for governor. Roy Cooper's been a great governor. I think we have an organization there, a message, and voters in that state do not want to go down that really extreme path. I think that state in particular is one that we can really turn this time around. And it's one of those 7, I think, Chris, any one of which could be the decisive state in a very close election.
All right, Dan Cannon, who is running Battle States for the Harris-Walz campaign, a heavy load to carry. Thanks for making a little time for us, and I appreciate it.